Thanks to advancements in technology, investing has become easier and more accessible than ever. In this episode, we sit down with Tore Steen at Crowdstreet to discuss their commercial real estate investment portal. Along with making this type of investment more accessible, their portal is integrated with DocuSign and Verify Investor and is meant to streamline the entire workflow for investors. Tore is the CEO and co-founder of Crowdstreet, previously leading marketing and sales efforts at Janrain, WebTrends and EarthLink. All right, thank you so much for joining me, Tore. I'm excited to learn more about Crowdstreet, how it started, the direction that you guys are heading and the future of it, as well as how you are constantly innovating and staying current. So first off, tell me, what year did Crowdstreet start, and where are you guys based?
Yeah, so we started Crowdstreet in 2013. We're headquartered in Portland, Oregon, and then we launched, actually public launch was in April of 2014.
Gotcha. How many employees, how big is your team right now?
Yeah, so today we're 90 employees. So we've come a long way from just Darren, my co-founder, and myself. So there's two of us in 2013 to now 90 at the end of 19.
Awesome. Now, how many customers are you serving right now as well?
Yeah, so when you think of customers, right, we're a two-sided marketplace, right? Because we came into this to provide open access to investors to invest in commercial real estate across our country. So on one side, we consider customers the investors, the consumers. And we've got over 40,000 registered accredited investors on our marketplace today. And then on the other side would be kind of the supply side, right? The product, the commercial real estate developers or operators, we call them sponsors. And we've got over 300 sponsors that we work with across the country. We've done deals in 42 different states. So we pretty much covered most of the country. There's a few small states that might not have as big of a development options, but that's kind of the customer base.
Gotcha. So 40,000 and connected to 200. Tell me more about then the market segment of the problem that you're solving for this connection that you're making.
Yeah, so when Darren and I got started, Alex, in 2013, it was really to provide access and transparency and efficiency for investors to invest in commercial real estate. It's been, one of our largest industries in the U.S. It's also been one of the most private and kind of locked industries in terms of investors being able to access a building and see a building going up or a building being redone. But being able to be investors in that. It's traditionally been beholden to large institutional investors or ultra high net worth where they've got to put millions of dollars into that deal, right? And so what we wanted to do was provide more access, more transparency, and more efficiency for a consumer.
What's the lowest then an investor could already get involved with?
Yeah, so we've dropped the minimums down to as low as $25,000. And again, this is probably a 10x decrease to what traditionally would be invested through, let's call it the country club model, where a developer operator had high net worth investors, and they would say, look, minimum investment is $250,000. So we've been able to bring that down by 10x. And to the developers, to the sponsors, if you will, we provided a technology platform to enable that to happen. Because you don't do that in the offline world, right? Paper-based. It would not be scaled.
That would not be efficient. That would not scale. So tell me more about then the technology behind it, the platform itself.
Yeah, so when we kind of broke it down, Alex, we looked at and said, what is the entire process that a developer goes through to raise the capital and then to manage investors? So we think about it, the presentation of a deal. A lot of times they've, in the older days, they'd print out packages, right, and deliver a package. Now they send PDFs. And so how do we do that in kind of an online paradigm? So we have kind of a publishing platform so they can, everything that they used to email, they now put up on the website. And so for an investor, everything's at my fingertips, right? I don't have to check emails. I don't have to get something in the mail. I've got this beautiful website with everything about the deal. It's got all the pro formas. It's got the pictures. It's got kind of everything that the package would have. The second piece of kind of that process that we enabled with technology was, let's call it the transaction. It's kind of like in e-commerce. It's like your cart checkout process, right? And so what does an investor go through from submitting their offer to signing documents to wiring their funds and then ultimately being invested into that deal? We've done that in a kind of a streamlined online workflow. Then the fun begins is once you're invested, how do I get updates about my investment? How do I get distributions? And so we've managed to use technology for the sponsors to really enable an online way to manage investors, kind of like a CRM system, to manage your investors. But here it's an actual live investor portal where they can upload documents. The investors get triggered emails. They know when their quarterly updates are coming in. So that entire kind of investor lifecycle management.
You've been able to incorporate into your platform. Tell me more about then partnerships or API connections. It sounds like there's many pieces you've already mentioned, whether it's the transfer, the money transfers. Tell me more about kind of partnerships or API connections that you've created.
Yeah, so we've had some of the ones that brand names we know, DocuSign, API integration with DocuSign, so that as an investor goes through, they don't have to pop back out, sign actually a wet signature. So DocuSign's integrated. Another one's called Verify Investor. So as part of this process, the SEC requirement is that an investor go through an accredited verification process. So there's a third party called Verify Investor. We've got an API integration to them to enable that. And then we've obviously got an API integration to a kind of a clearinghouse, if you will, North Capital Private Securities, that does kind of escrow management, ACH management, and all that good stuff that, plenty of other third parties that do that better than us reinventing it. So having those API integrations ultimately to streamline the entire workflow for an investor so that they don't have to pop out and do other things. They can stay inside that consistent process.
For entrepreneurs that realize the power of making API connections to their own platform, any learnings that you had over the years, have you had to incorporate those APIs that you could share?
Well, yeah, one of the learnings I've had, and this is, I've been in SaaS and internet space most of my career, so I've done a lot of integrations with partners, a lot of challenges in that, road. I think one of the challenges we have is, we're built on a modern architecture, so we have kind of APIs built out of the box that are easy to integrate with. It's harder when you work with some players out there in the industry who maybe you're not on a modern architecture. They don't have publicly available APIs. So it's really, going through a process with those types of partners to say, let's figure out what's possible. Maybe it's, not an API integration, but a file upload of a CSV. I hate to go all the way to that rudimentary way, but Excel's been around. And if you can create a CSV import or export functionality. So we've actually had to create kind of that CSV importing and exporting functionality for those that might not have APIs.
Gotcha. So realizing where you can try to work a relationship, a partnership, or when you just have to, this is as far as the bar will go.
Just kind of brute force it, right? Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, how are you continuing to move forward and innovate? Like, tell me any plans for 5 years from now. Where do you see the company?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question because we've actually been doing some major innovation in the last year, Alex. So when we first started, the marketplace you could think of as self-serve. So an investor would come, we would be screening and vetting and the quality control over the deals that would go onto our marketplace. But ultimately, investor had to pick and choose which deals they wanted to go into. This year, we launched our own series of funds. So a Crowdstreet investment vehicle where we create a pooled fund of diversified assets. So an investor doesn't have to pick and choose. And for $25K, they can put that into the fund, which will then diversify across 30 or 40 deals in a 9-month period. They'll get a little bit of multifamily, a little bit of senior housing, a little bit of office, industrial, different risk profiles, some ground up, but some more income producing kind of core assets. So these are new products that, again, when we think about how do we delight investors, right? Because ultimately it's about how are we delighting the consumers that come to our marketplace. So as we look forward, I look at we just launched our Opportunity Zone Fund, right? Opportunity Zones is a big deal in the market today because of the capital gains tax shelter capabilities that investors can see. So we've been kind of continually innovating in some of these products. Our marketplace is kind of obviously the place that this all kind of breathes and lives. And so you're gonna see more interesting kind of products that Crowdstreet's gonna provide because there's 12 million accredited investors in the US. And I shared with you, we got 40,000. We're just getting started.
Just getting started. I can see the vision and it's interesting the additional products you can bring on that can attract and connect and resonate with different types of customers and clients. Can you share any your thoughts on There's hurdles, obviously. In order to get to maybe even reach all 12 million, what do you see are going to be the hurdles you're going to need to overcome in order to realize the vision?
So one of the hurdles, and again, today it's been very direct to consumer, right? We've been, Brent and our marketing team's done a great job of kind of getting the message out there, getting the brand out there, attracting, accredited investors. But we know that a lot of investors like to go through their advisors, right? When they're making investment advice, they say, you know what, I'd like somebody, I have a financial advisor that's my fiduciary that kind of helps me with my investments. So one of our challenges, one of our opportunities really, is how do we make our products and services also accessible to a financial advisor, right? Because that might be the person that then is really making the investment on behalf of their client. And as we all know, financial advisors have had access to stocks and bonds and mutual, all the usual kind of more publicly traded, more liquid investments, and these more private, illiquid investments that have great returns have been less accessible to those advisors, or if they have been accessible, they've been kind of a publicly traded REIT, right? Which is really a stock that you're owning it as part of a bigger company.
Interesting. So taking the potential hurdle of these financial advisors being a gatekeeper and almost turning them into a customer themselves.
Exactly. We have to look at them as the potential customer because they are the trusted intermediary between Crowdstreet's marketplace and the ultimate investor.
Well, I excited to then see as you continue to explore understanding different mindsets and being able to serve that. For you personally, how are you innovating? Where are you looking to grow personally? Do you go to any websites or thoughts or ideas how do you generate new concepts and ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been in the internet space since 98, 99. So I'm constantly looking at new technologies and new features. And again, it's a little mundane, but for example, productivity optimization, right? In a company that's 90 people, we're not 900 or not 9,000, right? So always thinking about how can you be more efficient? How can you make your team more efficient? And what tools can do that as we're trying to scale the business? So example would be using Trello now, right? We've got multiple teams around CrowdStreet that have now become like addicts to Trello, right? It's kind of like I hear about a Trello board and another board, and it's great, right? Because it's making the teams more efficient, and it's a really great way for them to collaborate. So having these new kind of collaboration, as we knew, 10 years ago, there weren't a lot of collaboration tools. Then there was a whole bunch, and now people kind of we use Slack a lot, for example, right? So now that's kind of picking those tools that can really optimize teams.
Awesome. Do you have any favorite books or audiobooks or podcasts that you're listening to right now that you'd recommend for another entrepreneur or CEO?
Yeah, one that I actually am rereading again is John Doerr's Measuring What Matters. And it's just a great reminder. It talks about OKRs, objectives and key results. And again, methodologies have been around forever in terms of how do you kind of set strategic initiatives, how do you measure those, how do you, kind of keep your teams aligned. And I think Measure What Matters by John Doerr is kind of one of my favorites. It's a quick, easy read. It just kind of reorients you as, how do you lead teams? How do you set initiatives? How do you set the kind of objectives for them? So it's a good book. It's a favorite.
I'll have to check that out. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people go to learn more? What's kind of the first next step that you'd recommend they take? Yeah,
we've tried to make it as easy as possible. They just go to crowdstreet.com and they'll see that, lots of content, because we recognize that, again, this is an asset type that people traditionally haven't had access to. So we have a lot of educational content about how to invest in commercial real estate, what to look for. We've got our blended portfolio that kind of is very easy to kind of get started. And so, lots of great content, lots of articles. We do a lot of webinars on there as well, to really help investors, determine what's the right path for them. And then they can register there and start looking at some of the deals, because we got at least 3 deals that go on every week, new deals that go up on the marketplace.
Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.